no, it's not going to be that easy. So will Caitlin Clark be a good pro? Absolutely. Will Caitlin Clark come into the WNBA and do what she's doing right now immediately? Absolutely not. Not going to happen.
Okay.
There seems to be some haterade in the league in regards to Clark, starting with WNBA legend Sheryl Swoopes.
I'm going to say this, and then I want to be done with this whole conversation. So for people to come at me and say that I made those comments because I'm a racist, first of all, black people can't be racist, but that's the farthest thing from my mind.
It was validate all the speculation that there's folks hating on Caitlin Clark. That's all she did.
The air in the WNBA isn't just the smell of hardwood and resin anymore. It's charged with something else entirely. The crackle of a cultural shift, the friction of a changing of the guard, and the deafening roar of a new audience that arrived not just to watch a game, but to crown a queen. At the center of this hurricane is Caitlin Clark, a rookie whose entrance into the league felt less like a debut and more like a tectonic event. And swirling around her, from the very moment her name was called on draft night, has been a storm of scrutiny, admiration, and a particular pungent brand of skepticism that often curdled into something that felt, to millions of new fans, like outright hostility. The conversation started predictably enough, with the measured tones of sports analysis. Will Caitlin Clark be a good pro? Absolutely, one might say. Will she come into the WNBA and do what she did in college immediately? Absolutely not. Not going to happen. That's standard, fair, even prudent commentary. The leap from NCAA dominance to professional excellence is a canyon few cross unscathed. But almost immediately, the discourse leapt past prudence into something far more personal and electrically charged. It found a potent voice in a figure who embodies the very history of the league, Sheryl Swoopes. Swoopes, a Hall of Famer, a pioneer, one of the original faces of the WNBA, a legend whose credentials are unimpeachable, began to voice criticisms of Clark that resonated with a strange, dissonant frequency. It wasn't about her shooting selection or defensive footwork, the typical grist for the rookie adjustment mill. It seemed to strike at the legitimacy of her very presence and her records. She questioned the validity of Clark's monumental NCAA scoring record, suggesting the extra COVID year of eligibility afforded her an unfair advantage. If you're going to break a record, to me, if it's legitimate, you have to break that record in the same amount of time that
If you're going to break a record, to me, if it's legitimate, you have to break that record in the same amount of time that player set it.
Okay.
So if Kelsey Plum set that record in 4 years, well, Caitlin should have broke that record in 4 years. But because there's a COVID year and then there's another year, you know what I mean? So she's already had an extra year to break that record. So is it truly a broken record? Yeah, that'll go in the record books as Caitlin Clark is the all-time, whatever it is. I don't even know what the number is, but that's the way it'll be. And I don't think it should be.
player said it. Swoopes argued publicly, framing Clark's achievement as structurally flawed. She made wildly inflated claims about Clark's shot volume, stating she took about 40 shots a game, a number nearly double her actual average. These weren't minor factual errors. They were narrative grenades, designed not to critique but to deconstruct and diminish. To Clark's fervent, newly minted fan base, a massive, predominantly young and digitally native army, this didn't sound like analysis. It sounded like haterade. It felt targeted, personal, and dripping with an resentment they couldn't quite name. The sentiment crystallized around Swoopes. When confronted with accusations that her commentary was rooted in something darker, Swoopes fired back defensively. For people to come at me and say that I made those comments because I'm a racist, first of all, black people can't be racist, but that's the farthest thing from my mind. In doing so, she didn't douse the flames. She poured gasoline on them, validating the perception that there was, in fact, a faction within the basketball establishment that was hating on Caitlin Clark. But this story...
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about bullies, we can talk about every time Caitlin has the ball, she pushes off.
Oh no.
I'm just saying, like,
but she has that advantage.
Sheryl Swoopes begs WNBA fans to
is far bigger than a social media spat or a war of words between a legend and a phenom. It's a story about what happens when the past, armed with the bitterness of built too slowly recognition, clashes with a future that arrived overnight, wielding unprecedented economic and cultural power. And it's a story about how patterns repeat, how leadership or the lack thereof echoes across different arenas, and how a league at a fragile, glorious inflection point finally decides what it needs to protect. Because a major development just hit, one that sent ripples far beyond the court and straight into the heart of this raging cultural conversation. Reports began to circulate that Sheryl Swoopes had been let go from her broadcasting role with the Dallas Wings. This wasn't another trending argument or a viral clip. This was a professional consequence. And the reason it ignited wasn't just about basketball commentary. It was about a familiar, troubling arc being completed in public view. People who had followed Swoopes' career pointed back, past the podcast takes and studio segments, to a chapter many had forgotten or never known. Her tumultuous tenure as head coach at Loyola University Chicago. The stories that surfaced from there weren't of tough love or...
She averaged 31.6, 7.4 rebounds, 9 assists, right? Did anyone expect her to do that in WNBA?
Those three? No.
Right? So she didn't do that.
No.
Now, if we say her stats are today, what?
20 points, 8.4 assists, 6 rebounds.
That's crazy.
But
That's crazy. Is that dominant?
those are hell of a numbers.
Those are hell of a numbers.
rookie.
But to me, that's not
Period.
dominating.
Yeah, it's only not dominating because she's a rookie.
Now,
If
No.
Yeah,
so
because if she's putting up numbers like Asia right now, would she be dominating?
yes.
So it's about the numbers. I don't look at the dominating factor being numbers. It's what you're doing on the floor.
demanding excellence. They painted a picture of a volatile, unpredictable environment. Players described practices that could spiral into chaos, where Swoopes would sometimes walk out entirely or conduct a full session in stony, punishing silence. They alleged a toxic power dynamic where scholarships were wielded as leverage and private confidences were breached, shattering locker room trust. One particularly damning allegation involved a player, Lauren Hibbard, who was reportedly persuaded to sign a medical hardship form with promises of a continued team role, promises that, according to the accounts, vanished once the paperwork was signed. The university's investigation in 2016 did not find evidence of physical abuse or NCAA violations, but it found enough to conclude that the environment was untenable. Athletic director Steve Watson terminated Swoopes. The quote that lingered from former player Kate Sins cut to the core. Swoopes was like the Michael Jordan of women's basketball, but didn't know how to teach. The legend on the court could not translate her genius into nurturing growth in others. Instead, she cultivated tension. This Loyola chapter is not a random footnote. It is the blueprint. It reveals a pattern of behavior where pressure turns to control, control morphs into instability, and criticism ceases to be constructive, becoming instead a weapon. When Swoopes
Also talk about how much more experience that gives you over other players coming in, right? So people say, dang, like he or she's killing them, but you have a 25-year-old playing against a 20-year-old. Like, you should be killing them. Because you've been doing it a lot longer than they have. Clark right now probably takes about 40 shots a game.
Here we go.
transitioned from the sideline to the broadcaster's chair, this pattern didn't disappear. It simply found a new, amplified stage. The isolated gym was replaced by the global microphone. The pressure on a handful of college athletes became scrutiny on a global icon. In the media arena, the same energy, the escalation, the personalization, the relentless framing of a rising star as an illegitimate phenomenon played out on a loop. Her comments on Clark felt less like dispassionate observation and more like a campaign. Every milestone Clark reached was met not with applause but with an asterisk. Every highlight was reframed as a product of hype, not skill. To the audience, it felt repetitive, targeted, and deeply personal. It wasn't, let's see how she adjusts. It was, why is she being celebrated at all? The backlash was inevitable and ferocious. It moved from online comments to mainstream pushback. Stephen A. Smith publicly chastised Swoopes for omitting Clark from praise of the Indiana Fever's improvement, asking pointedly, respectfully, Sheryl Swoopes, you have any idea how that makes you look? More damningly, another legend, Nancy Lieberman, stepped in. Lieberman revealed she had reached out to Swoopes privately to correct the factual inaccuracies about Clark's record and shot attempts, stating simply, facts matter. That relationship, she said, fractured after that conversation. The contrast was stark. One legend insisting on accuracy and building up the game, another perpetuating narratives that many saw as an attempt to tear its brightest light down. The fan reaction became its own cultural artifact. In Iowa and beyond, "Don't be a Sheryl" T-shirts sprouted in stands.
No Caitlin Clark. Respectfully, Sheryl Swoopes, you have any idea how that makes you look?
Online, her name became a trigger, synonymous with a bitter, old guard resentment. The audience had made its judgment. They no longer trusted the intent behind the commentary. And in the new economy of the WNBA, where attention is the currency and growth is the mandate, that loss of trust is a professional death knell. The professional consequence unfolded not with a bang, but with a quiet, unmistakable whisper. Swoopes was absent from Dallas Wings broadcasts, featuring Clark. Then, her name was missing from the 2025 broadcast team announcements altogether. The opportunities dried up. The segments vanished. There was no fiery press release, no dramatic farewell. The silence itself was the statement. The league, consciously or not, was moving on. It was choosing its momentum. The timing of what came next only cemented the perception. After months of criticism, as her platform visibly eroded, Swoopes' public tone underwent a sudden, stark pivot. She began offering praise for Clark and the Fever, talking about roster construction and chemistry. The message was supportive, polished, but the audience, now hyper-attuned to the subtext, didn't buy it. It landed not as a change of heart, but as damage control. The whiplash was fatal to her credibility. The very fans who had audited her every critique now met her compliments with sarcasm and skepticism. Once you are seen as operating in bad faith, even your blessings sound like strategy. And while this saga of sound bites and professional reckonings consumed the digital world, something far more important was happening on the court in Indiana. The Caitlin Clark era was transitioning from hype to infrastructure. The Fever were building. They were no longer just the Caitlin Clark show. They were developing into a legitimate contender. The pieces were falling into place with a clarity that rendered the off-court noise irrelevant. Aaliyah Boston provided the perfect interior anchor, a reliable, intelligent finisher whose chemistry with Clark was turning pick and rolls into a devastating system. Kelsey Mitchell emerged as the essential pressure valve, a certified bucket getter who punished defenses for overcommitting to Clark. Surrounding them, shooters like Sophie Cunningham and defenders like Lexi Hull filled the crucial, unglamorous roles that transform a collection of talent into a coherent team. Clark herself was evolving. Her impact became more than just staggering stats. She warped the geometry of the game. The moment she crossed half court, defenses panicked, rotations stretched, and space opened for her teammates. The painful lessons of early playoff exits, the missed box outs, the costly turnovers were hardening into a collective obsession with detail. This young core wasn't just happy to be there. They were scarred by near misses and hungry for more. This is the ultimate irony of the
Rising tide lifts all boats. Whatever it takes for everybody to get fed, I'm all for it. You a WNBA player? Caitlin Clark gonna get you paid. I'd figure out a way to be her friend.
Entire saga. While Sheryl Swoopes was trapped in a cycle of criticism and consequence, trying to talk her way back into relevance, Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever were doing the only thing that truly silences debates. They were building a winner. They were translating unprecedented attention into tangible progress, viral moments into playoff experience, and individual brilliance into collective trust. The WNBA, in its quiet handling of the Swoopes situation, signaled which path it valued. The league is in a new era, one where its biggest stars are full-scale media economies. Clark is the apotheosis of this shift.
4 WNBA championships. You know basketball. You know basketball better than me.
Protecting the momentum around this new generation isn't about censorship or choosing sides in a petty feud. It's about stewardship. It's about recognizing that the energy, the investment, and the eyes that players like Clark bring are too vital to be constantly poisoned by commentary that feels personally bitter, factually sloppy, and fundamentally rooted in resisting the very change that is fueling the league's long-awaited boom. The saga of Sheryl Swoopes and Caitlin Clark is therefore a parable for this moment. It exposes the peril of mistaking bitterness for authority, of clinging to a past frame of reference when the future has already rewritten the rules. You can ride controversy for a while, but eventually the sport moves forward. It leaves behind those who cannot or will not adapt to what the moment demands. This was never just about an analyst getting a fact wrong. It was about a pattern of framing historic success as a problem, of turning joy into suspicion, and momentum into a threat. But the Caitlin Clark era didn't shrink under that gaze. It exploded, magnifying everything in its path: the stars, the fans, the revenue, and the glaring disconnect between the old guard and the new wave. Now, the climax of this story won't be written on Twitter or in a broadcast booth. It will be written on the court. If the Indiana Fever, forged in the fire of this constant scrutiny and built around their transformative star, make a deep championship run, the entire noisy, bitter debate will fade into a historical footnote. It will be remembered as the messy, painful, but necessary growing pains of a league learning to step into its own spotlight. It will be the moment women's basketball finally chose growth over grudges and allowed its future to be decided not by the voices on the microphone, but by the poetry in motion on the floor. The real ending is yet to come. The question is no longer about who is hating or why. The question now is, are the Indiana Fever ready to win it all? Because in the end, the scoreboard doesn't care about narratives. It only tells the truth. And that truth is coming, one game at a time.